Thanks for tuning into this edition of Business Daily. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Lee Ji-yoon. Before we get started, let's first get a quick check of today's highlights. There are growing calls for Korea to expand currency swap deals to hedge against risks from a potential global recession. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. On top of a rising debt burden for college students here in Korea, it's getting more difficult for fresh graduates to land jobs and even find companies that are actually hiring. But first, Korea has moved up a notch to become the world's 6th largest exporter. It's the country's highest ranking following a general upward trend. But the future isn't as rosy. Our Lee Ji-won starts us off.
Korea was the world's 6th largest exporter last year, moving up a notch from the year before, despite the sluggish global economy and low global oil prices. According to the World Trade Organization on Thursday, Korea's exports amounted to $527 billion last year, putting the country in 6th out of the 71 exporters surveyed. China topped the list with $2.27 trillion, followed by the US with $1.5 trillion and Germany with $1.3 trillion. The report says with the global economic slump and low oil prices, the world's export volume decreased by about 11% last year. But the impact was relatively less severe for Korea, which saw its exports decline 8% last year from 2014, increasing Korea's share of global export volume. Korea has been rising in the WTO's ranking in recent years. In 2008, Korea ranked 12th. It moved up to 9th the following year, and now 7 years later has gone up 6 notches to 6th. But the news isn't all good. Korea has been suffering from sluggish exports for 13 straight months since January of last year and could continue for a 14th month if the streak continues through this month. That's the longest period of decline since record-keeping began in 1970. Analysts point to the global economic slowdown and oversupply from China as the biggest culprits. And because those problems are not likely to be resolved in the short term, they expect the downward trend to continue for a while. Lee Ji-won, Business Daily.
Iran has offered support for the first joint OPEC and non-OPEC deal in 15 years to put a ceiling on oil production. On the news, oil prices enjoyed an upswing, but as it's unclear whether Tehran will join the move to freeze output at January levels, analysts expect downward pressure to continue for the time being. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Global oil prices surged on Wednesday. West Texas Intermediate spiked more than 5% to finish at over $30 a barrel, while Brent crude jumped over 7% to $34.59. The surprise uptick came after Iran voiced support for a recent agreement between crude giants, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Venezuela to freeze levels of oil production at January levels. But it remains to be seen if Iran will follow suit, as it did not offer any word, and Tehran earlier said it would boost production to regain market share after years of sanctions.
I do not believe that Iran will be willing anytime soon to agree in order to, they're not going to be willing to leave the game before they started.
Global oil prices have plunged over 70% in the past 20 months, driven by near-record production from OPEC and other producers. Analysts expect the downward pressure on oil to continue.
For one, the U.S. is not part of the deal, and it remains to be seen whether the countries that agreed to it will keep their word. Also, who is going to monitor this, and how will sanctions be imposed if it's violated? On top of that, Iran is nowhere near producing the full amount it can, as it's still subject to sanctions in some areas. When Iran reaches full capacity, the supply glut is just going to get worse.
Many analysts are on the same page that the move to freeze, not cut the output, will make little difference to the ongoing supply-demand imbalance, keeping prices from rising anytime soon. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Policymakers at the U.S. Federal Reserve are considering changing their planned path for raising rates throughout this year. According to the minutes of the Fed's January policy meeting, policymakers discussed altering their earlier views of the appropriate path for the target range for the federal funds rate. Since the Fed's 25 basis point rate hike in December, oil prices have continued to fall and global markets have been highly volatile. Now, some members said tighter economic conditions would be roughly equivalent to further hikes. This suggests the Fed is considering backing away from its previous forecast of increasing rates 4 times this year. And many economists project the Fed will raise rates twice this year, possibly in June and in December. A report issued by the Korea Economic Research Institute this week suggests that Korea is in need of some $80 billion more in foreign exchange reserves to insulate itself from a potential global financial crisis. In fact, the country's forex reserves dipped for the 3rd consecutive month in January, largely due to the depreciation of the non-US dollar assets like the British pound. But still, Korea remains the world's 7th largest holder of forex reserves. So why should we be worried? To tell us more about this, Professor Kim Se-wan from Ewha Women's University joins us in the studio today. So good to see you, Professor.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so amid the slowing global economy, it looks like more countries are lowering the value of their currencies to boost their export competitiveness. So what's the situation like right now in the global currency market?
Well, recent turmoils of the international currency market has been pretty much generated by depreciation, extensive depreciation policies of major economies like China, Japan, and European countries. As we know, depreciation is a major financial tool to increase the export by improving price competitiveness, but not the quality competitiveness. So we named it as a beggar my neighbor policy.
All right, then let's zone in on Korea then. Some experts have been saying that the global recession is nearby, it's coming up. With that in mind, do you think Korea has sufficient foreign exchange reserves to guard itself from potential global recession?
Well, according to Bank of Korea, the size of foreign reserve held by central bank is about $370 billion, which is one of the largest in the world.
Right.
However, we do not have clear consensus about the appropriate size of the foreign reserve between economists, central banks, and governments. Some say it is too much, and some say it is too small. However, facing the economic crisis and instability, it needs to be increased up to $400 billion from today's $370 billion level.
All right, $400 billion. Now, there are also concerns over Korea being hit by a massive capital outflow, which is why economists are suggesting that Korea should expand currency swap deals with other major economies. So how would these currency swap deals affect the countries involved as well as their respective financial markets?
Yes, currency swap is something like a insurance, buying insurance against the rapid outflow of the capital from domestic market. So it is a contract between central bank that enables the other side to withdraw the domestic currency as much as predetermined. So for example, if we have $30 billion of currency swaps with US Federal Reserve, we can withdraw up to $30 billion anytime we want.
Okay.
So it is going to be a big help to stabilize domestic financial market.
All right, well then currently which countries does Korea have currency swap arrangements in place with?
Well, as far as I know, we have currency swaps with several countries like with China, Malaysia, and India, Australia, and United Arab Emirates. The total size of the currency swap is about $120 billion. Oh, wow. And out of that, $40 billion are about US dollar based.
Okay. Well, just last month, there were also discussions over resuming a currency swap deal between China and Japan. So do you think Korea is in need of more?
Well, I'm actually glad that you pointed out. I think participating the currency swap with Japan and China is the most necessary and available measure to stabilize Korean financial market. And it is also beneficial to both of the China and Japan because it increased the size of the swaps.
All right, but some have pointed out that these deals come with limitations, and what really needs to be done is the fixes. We need to strengthen our economic fundamentals. What's your stance on this?
Well, that is true. If we have more swap contracts with other countries, central banks, that can give a wrong signal that our Korean financial market has been weakened. So international financial market is like a jungle. If we are weak, they attack us for making money, as we've seen from George Soros' hedge funds attack on Chinese yuan. So in the end, in the long run, I mean, we need to focus on strengthen our fundamentals.
Right, rather than focusing so much on the
Exactly.
short-term results. So what kind of steps then should Korea take as uncertainties prevail both at home and abroad?
Well, in addition to participating swap contracts with Japanese Central Bank and possibly United States Federal Reserve, we need to maintain or increase the size of the foreign reserve. And in addition, it is important to switch short-term foreign debt to long-term foreign debt.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today, Professor.
Thank you very much.
The global flexible display market is expected to grow over twofold this year, with more companies rushing to jump into the sector. According to industry tracker IHS, the world's flexible display market is estimated to grow to $5.36 billion this year, from $2.4 billion last year. The shipment volume is set to double to 122 million units compared to 55 million last year, and Korean companies are the only players in the world that have started a full-fledged mass production of flexible displays. Samsung Display produced the flexible OLED for the Galaxy Round, a curved smartphone, in 2013. And LG Display, another Korean panel maker, announced last year that it will spend over $8 billion to build a new OLED panel factory to meet the rising demand. Last month's youth unemployment rate of 9.5% might just be the start of an ever more challenging job market for college graduates this year. In fact, a local recruitment company says the odds of landing a job this year may be slimmer. Our Lee Joo-young tells us more.
The road to employment for fresh university graduates seems to be getting rougher by the year in Korea. And this reality is frustrating job seekers.
I worked quite hard on my grades and got a higher than average TOEIC score, but even passing the first round was tough.
I only applied for 10 companies in the second half of last year to focus on them. But although I don't lack in qualifications, I keep getting ruled out on the final interview.
But the prospect of landing a job this year may be even gloomier, according to a local recruitment company in Crute. In a survey of 1,700 listed firms in Korea, only 48.8% of firms said they had plans to hire fresh graduates as regular employees, while 14.7% said they had none. Compared to last year, when 55% of companies were hiring, it's a 6.2 percentage point drop. The number of people firms plan on hiring varied depending on company size as well. Large companies said they intend to hire over 19,000 new people in 2016, up 1.1% on year. But more established mid-sized firms and SMEs said they will hire less, with the on-year recruitment rate dropping by 14.8% and 26% respectively. Crute attributed the lack of activity in the job market to the slow economy, adding that openings at even large firms are mostly irregular positions. Firms in the construction, retail, and distribution industry were most open to new hires, while those in the fashion and food industry planned to hire less. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
Can you imagine an era where you can get internal organs tailor-made through 3D printing? It's a technology that's being developed on the coattails of advances in 3D bioprinting that could open up a new type of treatment technique altogether. Our Eunice Kim takes a peek.
The researcher injects stem cells into an artificial bone. The idea is to create customizable artificial bones, utilizing 3D bioprinting technology to produce pieces beyond the plastics and metals typically tied to 3D printing.
We're able to fuse technology that makes customized human tissue with cell printing to create organs that can then be transplanted in a human body.
The artificial organs would be developed based on data collected from CT scans or MRIs. While the current early stages of research are centered around recreating the smallest parts of artificial bones and cartilage, the goal is to produce bioprinting systems for things like skin regeneration and complicated human organs such as the heart. It may still sound like science fiction, but by printing artificial organs with the recipient's cells embedded, this technology could help solve the current challenges of rejections from the body in a transplant. It can also reduce the time in the operation room.
If there is more dynamic and consistent research, we believe it'll be possible to recreate all parts of the body that have been damaged.
The government has shown keen interest in developing the science, just last year investing millions of dollars in a local 3D printer manufacturer to create a system that can print human tissues in cooperation with Korean medical research organizations. And as the technology is tested on animals, there are hopes it could potentially open a new era in medicine, where functional human body parts can be tailor-made. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
All right, that does it for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.